your co-founder is like, that's your guy. Like you're in this together.
As a solopreneur and building an online business, you may be at your kitchen table all day and not interact with anyone. It is extremely lonely to build an online business as a solopreneur.
Hey everyone, this is Heini and Zachariassen here, and welcome to Founders Weekly, where we tell startup stories you can learn from. Today's topic is about being a solopreneur. What is it like? Why should you choose to go solo, and why should you choose not to? Most founders have actually tried to be solo at some point, but today we have two people on who have done it extensively. My co-host today is Brian D. He is the founder of Backlinko that he sold to SEMrush, and the current CEO of Exploding Topics. For the first time, co-host on Founders Weekly. Welcome, Brian.
Thanks for having me, Heini. Great to be here.
Can you handle the pressure of being, co-host for the first time?
We'll see.
We'll see. We'll know soon enough.
Find out.
Do you have like a big scotch next to you just to calm the nerves, or what's it like?
Yep, I got a little one here. I needed it. And a couple Xanax.
Yes, exactly. So where are you today, Brian?
I'm in Lisbon, Portugal.
Oh, very nice. But you were born in the US, right?
Yeah. Oh, yeah. American as apple pie. Even though I live here, I still don't watch soccer. So I guess I'm American to the bone.
Yeah, that's deep. You eat chicken wings and watch what you call proper football.
Exactly.
Okay, just to be clear, that being a solopreneur means being a solo founder. Most founders are solo founders at some point. Maybe it's while they're, it's a small idea, but very often, they're a solo founder for a period. But some people also double down on it and say, hey, this is what I am. This is what I like to be. But first, Brian, let's talk about your journey. At Backlinko, you were a solopreneur, and later with Exploding Topics, you had multiple co-founders. So let's start with Backlinko. Why did you choose to go in that direction? And what was that journey like?
It wasn't a choice. It was kind of like you said, Heini. Most people start as solopreneurs because you have the idea, you have the vision. So you're like, just get started. And as you go along, you may realize as someone that's a complementary skill set to yours, you can bring them on as a co-founder. In the case of Backlinko, it didn't make sense really to have a co-founder because as I went along, I worked with a lot of great people, but no one that I thought, I need a co-founder to help me with this thing that complements what I do. Whenever I had that gap, which there are tons of them, I just hired someone. Very different than a co-founder, but I never really found the need where it was like, I need a co-founder for this business.
Okay. And I think you sort of touch upon a key thing there. And it's because when you did Backlinko, it was about SEO, you were an expert, and then there was no like hardcore technology that you needed to build, right?
Correct.
Okay. So you didn't need any extra skills for that. And then you went on to Exploding Topics. How was that different?
That was different because I teamed up with someone that had already started the project. He was really the entrepreneur of that project. And I came in, bought the property from him, and it was basically an acqui-hire. He came on as a co-founder and we worked together on it. So from the start, he started maybe the first 1% of it, but enough to get a little bit of traction to show that it was real. And then we teamed up for the last 99% of the journey.
Okay. And had he been at it for some time, or how was that?
I think he'd been at it for about 3 or 4 months. So he basically built a public facing version of what he envisioned to test it out and get feedback. And that's what I saw. And that's why I was able to even reach out to him, because he built something, put it out there, and it got in front of me.
Very cool. And in this case, you could argue that you were sort of the one that came along and he saw, hey, there's some skills here. What was he looking for in you? How could you help this particular project?
I think it was marketing. I mean, we had perfect complementary skill sets. He was a good coder and he had that entrepreneurial mindset of just get it done. Like figure it out, get it done, obstacles, whatever, do it. Great combination. But he didn't really know about marketing. He didn't really know how to hire people. He didn't know how to manage people. He didn't know how to build a team. He didn't know how to build a brand. So like to give you an idea, what I bought from him was called Trend with 2 N's.co.
Okay.
And I was like, first thing, we got to change that name because no one's going to remember that.
This is not a marketable product.
No, not at all. Because even just saying it now, it's so painful. It's like pulling teeth just to describe it. So imagine over and over again trying to build a business saying our site is Trend with 2 N's and not .com. It's .co. You're dead in the water, like just from that. So changing it to Exploding Topics, which is a .com, and rebranding it, So I had a great designer from Backlinko that we brought over and designed the UI and made it really nice. So those things like made a tangible impact on day one. And of course, I had an audience from Backlinko that I was able to promote to on day one. So when we launched, I had an email list of like 150,000 subscribers, sent it out, got some early traction. And as you know, Heini, like those early days can be the toughest, and it was like a shortcut. So I think we both brought about equal to the table at the end of the day.
Amazing. Okay, in a second, we're going to talk about advantages and disadvantages by being a solopreneur. The one other thing I wanted to talk a little bit about here, and this might be, shall we say, touching on something a little bit sensitive, but what do you prefer, especially since you had co-founders? Let's not say I only want to work alone, but what do you prefer when you start a business? What do you like the most?
I mean, if I was going to start again, I would have a co-founder, I think.
And when you say that, what is the sort of primary reason for that?
The reason is, first of all, it's a little bit more fun to have someone that is not just a fellow team member, but they have skin in the game. You're in this together. You're building it together. Foxhole, whatever cliche you want to use, you guys are in this together, which is cool. And I never experienced that with Backlinko. Every victory, every failure was kind of on my shoulders. And having the co-founder there. There's also the practical element of complementary skill sets, complementary personalities, resources, experiences that you can both bring to the table. So you double that. It's not so much about getting more done because you can always just hire people to do work or use AI or use tools or whatever. It's more about having someone who can solve problems in a totally different way than you would. And when you're stuck, you're not just figuring it out alone, you have someone that you can do it with. Now, that, to be clear, we had a third co-founder that didn't end up really working out. And that showed me sort of the dark side of the co-founder thing, which is it can be a hindrance more than anything in certain cases. So if I chose a co-founder, it wouldn't just be a random person. It would be Josh, my co-founder for Exploring Topics. Yeah.
And it does sound like you were very different. It sounds like you was pretty technical, and then you could really bring on the marketing side of it, right?
Yep.
So let me turn that question around a little bit. I got a little bit curious. When would you be a solopreneur? Then in what case would you say, no, I'm going to do this alone?
I mean, there would be cases if, for example, the project just didn't make sense for a co-founder that I wanted to work with. So let's just say there was a project that I was like, I don't really know anyone that would be an ideal co-founder. I'm not going to force the issue because, like I mentioned, co-founder also has a massive risk, especially if you go 50-50 on it. I mean, I have a buddy who started a SaaS company. They raised money. They were going to be a unicorn. It didn't work out. They're still a decent business, but one of the co-founders, he was in it for that huge multiple exit. And now that they're not going to get that, he's like checked out, but he still owns whatever amount of the company. So you have this albatross on your business that you ultimately usually just buy back the shares from him. But even that is a pain. And sometimes they're just like a zombie co-founder. There was massive downsides to it. So it would only be if it was a slam dunk. This person's perfect. We're going to do it together. They're excited about it. You're excited about it. Otherwise, it would be solo founder. So basically the default is solo founder unless there's a project that would make sense for a co-founder. But I would obviously prefer the co-founder route.
Yeah. But what you're also saying, when you go for a co-founder, make sure the boxes are checked. All those things you just said, but also outcome. Are we in agreement of outcome? If you want something and they want something else, it's a huge problem too, right?
Yeah, that's a good point. And maybe they're open to multiple outcomes. I mean, that's what, like the guy that I'm referencing, he obviously, they raised money. They wanted this big outcome. It didn't happen. It's still a good, profitable business. He's happy running it. He enjoys it. So he was okay with this alternative scenario. The other guy, obviously, it was go big or go home. And he was hoping that it would either go big or flame out. And now that it sort of exists, it's almost worse because he feels stuck in the business.
Yeah, that sucks. I mean, something to say when it comes to co-founder, anyone bring on the cap table, I mean, you're more than married. I mean, people that you're married to, you can divorce. This is even harder. It's really, really difficult to get rid of people again.
Yeah, this is like married in the 1700s. Like it needs to be a massive reason for you to get a divorce.
Yeah. And it's hard. Okay, we're going to dig deeper into being a solopreneur. We'll bring in a guest who has also been a very successful solo founder. Stay tuned. We'll be right back after the break. Cool. And we are back. Our guest today is Pat Waltz. He is the founder of Starter Story, has been a solopreneur for a long time. So Pat, your primary business is Starter Story. Tell us a little bit about Starter Story.
Yeah. Starter Story is a platform where you can learn how regular people like you and me found their idea, many of them solopreneurs, how they came up with their idea, how they launched their idea, how they built their idea, and specifically how they got customers. Yeah, we're dedicated to inspiring people and sharing how it's really done. Many people who had a full-time job as well and kind of figured that out. We have a website with thousands of case studies where we actually interview these founders. And then we also have a popular YouTube channel where we go to their houses and interview them and share what solopreneurs built and the amazing businesses that changed their lives.
Fantastic. We'll make sure there's a link in the description here. And this would be all kinds of business. I mean, sometimes when we talk about startups, there's a definition, hey, funded, growth, all those things. This is all kinds of businesses.
Yeah. I mean, our main focus is on businesses that you could build from a laptop. So maybe not with funding, businesses you can build as a solopreneur without access to, crazy amounts of VC funding or, with connections to, in the industry. It's really like simple ideas that can change your life.
Amazing. And I guess you have some fantastic stories on there, right?
Yeah. I mean, we have some amazing stories. People who had an idea and just sat down, started coding, started doing deep work, started writing. And, with the power of the internet, the power of creating content, they, changed their lives forever. So there's so many stories. There's thousands. So, yeah. And
how does that feel? Is it satisfying? It feels like when you talk about it, that like, hey, yeah, we're changing people's lives.
Yeah. I mean, to me, that was just one of the reasons why I built it is I thought it was just insane that people were, changing their lives with a laptop and a simple idea, and that this information wasn't like super obvious to people. And I really wanted to take that information and boil it down to make it really simple, really actionable. Because, a lot of these other, bigger entrepreneurship things like, Forbes or Business Insider, they kind of talk about it, but they don't share exactly how it's done.
No.
That's the whole ethos of Starter Story is to make that information easy to find and transparent.
I guess you hit something there, right? You hit something that people like, and it could be just what you say, they just really make it actionable and short and straightforward, because people share actual numbers and so on too, right?
Yeah, that's a big thing is we don't really talk to, there's a lot of people online who don't share, their revenue figures. And if you don't share your numbers, then there's really not a whole lot to learn from. It's hard to tell, is this business successful? How successful is this business? So every founder we talk to, they're super transparent about their numbers. So they'll be sharing specifically, I make $10,000 a month with this specific idea, so that I know some kid who's watching this or someone who's watching this is, if I do this idea or if I build something similar, $10,000 a month is more than I make at my full-time job. And that's something to really aspire to, and to see that someone just like you can make, maybe twice or three times or even more than what you would make at your full-time job is the most inspiring part. If we didn't share the money, then I'm not sure that people would even be able to grasp what it means to have that business.
Yeah. It also shows a willingness to actually share, right? I think that's kind of cool.
Yeah.
Good. So we're going to talk about being a solopreneur today, and you've both done it on different levels. I understand you probably have a little bit bigger business now, Pat, but you have been for sure a big part of your career. So I split it into like three bigger subjects: motivation and discipline being one, resources, and scaling and funding. And then finally, I want to talk about advantages and disadvantages of the two of them. But let's talk about motivation and discipline first. How do you stay motivated and keep the discipline? Do you want to start with that, Pat?
Yeah. I mean, for me, I think the motivation came from a lot of places, but one thing that I think will resonate with people is that I had previously tried to start other businesses based on this older model, which is get co-founders. And when I started those businesses and I was working with those co-founders, I felt like I was more dedicated, or I wanted to move faster than these co-founders did, which isn't a knock to having co-founders, because if you have the right co-founder, then you could probably get more done and build something bigger, but the chances of you having the perfect co-founder when starting out are quite low. So for me, when that business basically failed, I said, okay, I want to find something that I can do myself. I'm kind of more of an impatient type of person, bias for action. That was a lot of my motivation, was like, no one else, I guess, is going to come along for this ride for me. I'm going to have to figure it out by myself. that is a big part of the motivation. And then also for me, it was a lot of just being fed up with working a full-time job. I wasn't an entrepreneur as a kid or, I went to college. I worked in corporate for about 5-6 years. And the motivation was just jumping between jobs and kind of realizing that, I was kind of fed up with it. And that was more of like a buildup over many years for me. And that was my motivation, is like, this kind of feels like my only way out.
But then you have to remember that, right? Because, at some point you get to this and you're 3 months in and suddenly your corporate job looks amazing because you got paid every 2 weeks, right? So did you forget that at some point?
For me, I was paid well. I had a good job. I was a software engineer. And for me, I was willing to lose it all because I wasn't really super focused on the money. I knew that I could move up. I knew that I could move up in corporate and, make 6 figures, 200,000, 300,000, 400,000, whatever tech companies pay for you. I was in tech, but I knew that I wasn't fulfilled. And I learned that by jumping between different jobs. So for me, it was so much more about freedom. And I was willing to basically, I would have been happy with maybe, I don't know, $5,000, $10,000 a month while having all my freedom. Obviously the business grew to much more than that, but the motivation for me was more freedom than it was a steady paycheck.
And Brian, I spoke about this before, and it's about finding the right co-founder. If you go down that route, it has to be the right one. What do you say, Brian?
Yeah, I mean, I've seen both sides of it. I've had a great co-founder and I've had a co-founder that didn't really work out. I can tell you that the wrong co-founder is the worst thing that can happen to your business, maybe worse than having a bad product, honestly. It can derail everything you're working on because everything you're doing, it's hard enough to grow a business without having this governor on the engine that's stopping you from making progress and moving quickly. Then on the other hand, I've had a great co-founder who aligned perfectly. We had complementary skill sets. We have the doer mindset. We like to move quickly, make decisions quickly, not agonize over things. So I've seen it both ways. So that's why I think the default should be no co-founder, unless you're certain that this is the person I'm going to roll with for 5 years through ups and downs. And if you're not really 99% certain about that, I think you're better off doing it alone.
And so the first one here, talk about motivation and discipline. Are you guys not worried that you might lose the end? It sounds like for you guys, it's been the other way around, that this other bloody co-founder didn't do anything. So now I'm demotivated. But what if you're alone? Isn't there a risk of that too?
Yeah, I mean, I'll just go first on this one. Yes, absolutely. But it depends on what you're doing it for and how motivated you are. I think Pat and I were similar work styles. Like we are super focused. And if we have something on our list, we're just going to do it. There's no option of not doing it. So that can, of course, run its course. And eventually you need to get more into some other greater reason to work on it. But if you need someone else to push you and to get things done, you're probably not in a good position to be an entrepreneur, because that co-founder's job is not to motivate you and not to get you through the tough times and get you out of bed. It's to add gasoline to the fire.
Yeah.
What do you say, Pat?
Yeah, agreed 100%. I think the benefit of being a solopreneur and doing it on your own is that, you don't need permission. If you want to just build it, you can go build it, you can go launch it, and you can go see what happens. The downside of having co-founders is the opposite, is that, you need to wait. That can be a bottleneck in your business.
You guys, it feels like you are a certain type. And isn't there a risk that, could it be the solopreneurship is for a certain person and others can do really, really well in groups? Could that be true?
Yeah, definitely. But keep in mind that as a solopreneur, you can still work with other people. It doesn't have to be just you the entire time. It's not like you sign a contract. I will be a solopreneur for the rest of my life. Like Pat and I both started as solopreneurs. We added staff. It's fine. Like it's a totally different thing, but it can get, you don't have to, it's not a commitment you're making. It's just a way to get going, really. And like Heini and I mentioned in the first segment, most people start as solopreneurs because you just don't have any, you look to your left, you look to your right. Okay, there's no one here who's going to go on this journey with me. I'm going to do it by myself. But that doesn't mean you necessarily need to do that the entire way.
Yeah. Yeah. And on the same point is, you don't need permission to start. You can just start now, but you don't have to end as a solopreneur.
No.
The worst thing would be is that don't start and you only wait for a co-founder and then you never start, or you just start as a solopreneur. And by building things and by showing the world that you can build, you will probably attract a co-founder if that is something that you really need. But you got to get started. And if there's no one sitting right next to you ready to go, you might as well just start building right now. And, everything will change once you start building, I think.
Totally. For some people, what I've heard a couple of times is that they have an idea. Maybe they've, they drew a few things on a piece of paper or whatever, and then they look for a co-founder to actually be able to build something, right? So they feel they're stuck there because they can't build, don't have the exact knowledge to do so, and maybe not the money either. I mean, that could be tricky. That case, you might have to find a co-founder, but you can't lower the bar there because you are going to be married to that person for a long time.
Yeah, and I've seen a lot of people do that. Actually, I'm sure you have too, Pat, where someone's in that exact scenario. They want, they're a non-technical co-founder. In other words, I have no skills and I don't bring anything to the table. I'm basically have an idea, which is worthless. So
yeah, totally.
If you want a technical co-founder to basically build something for you, you got to have something you bring to the table: money, experience, complementary skill set, preferably all of the above. Because the person that's building it is going to be the most valuable person on the team, not you, unless you bring some je ne sais quoi skill that's amazing.
Yeah.
So if you're in that position, I would actually recommend learning how to build that thing as opposed to looking for a co-founder.
Build some skills. Yeah. Figure it out.
Yeah. It's not,
be resourceful.
People learn how to code all different ways. And, with AI now, it's much easier than ever.
Yeah. I think there's so many ways to build stuff now, with AI or with no code, or, just even build something simple. Just putting together a website is building in its own way, or creating content is building. I think there's really two things that will attract people to you if you do want to get started, is that you're either the builder or you're the marketer. And if you aren't the builder, then you can be the marketer. Go find, there's a million people online that are really good at building and bad at marketing things. I've seen a bunch of businesses that, they kind of started, they got a couple customers, and then everything just shot up when they found someone who just focused on the marketing side of things. So if you're not willing to learn the marketing, that also is a good option to go find that kind of marketing co-founder.
I mean, what I always say, always say, hey, go build something. But the thing is, if you're not a technical person and you want to do something, you want to find a technical founder, just build something. I mean, just build something, because what you're also showing there is your resourcefulness, and you're showing others, oh, wow, I see the idea now. I see that someone who had no idea about coding still put this together, and then it can attract money and or co-founders, right?
100%. I mean, that's how I found my co-founder, Josh, for Exploding Topics, is he built a baby version of what ended up being the SaaS. And if he didn't build that and put it out there, I would have no idea. And if he cold emailed me and said, hey, I'm thinking of building this thing, do you want to check it out? I would probably be like, no. But the fact that you could see it and use it, and it was tangibly existed in the world, it was like, this guy can build. That's the kind of person I want to team up with.
Yep.
Okay, cool. Let's move to resources. So as a solo founder, there are going to be fewer skills available, all else equal, on the founding team, just because it's one person. So we like to sort of say that, on the founding team, when you get going, we love the team to sort of have, say, 90% of what needs to be built in the early stage. So that obviously is harder as a solo founder. And you guys have managed to do this, but that also, was part of the product you picked, right? So what are your thoughts on that? You will have fewer skills if you're a solopreneur.
Yeah, I think if you're a solopreneur, I mean, I put some notes here. Great solopreneurs probably can do 90% of what needs to be done to build it, and they're willing to learn the extra 10% to make that 100% to do it. So if they realize that marketing is the thing that needs to grow their business, they'll go out and learn marketing. They're able to learn quickly. They're self-motivated. They're kind of the jack of all trades. They're not really great at coding, but they're good at coding. They're not really great at marketing, but they're good at it. They're kind of just good at everything, not great at everything. That's like when the co-founders that I talk to through our YouTube channel and through Starter Story and all of our case studies, that is usually kind of like the profile that I see, is someone who's willing to do it all. They're also willing to experience the pain of having to learn those things. And they kind of like to do it all as well. So I'm sure someone listening to this or watching this is already self-selected into that. They're thinking about being a solopreneur. So hopefully some of those traits align with you a little bit.
Yeah, I think you're touching upon something that is really key here for the solopreneur. It is that it is some kind of like 360 personality, jack of all trades. And then if you get more people on board or get a co-founder later, you can let go of certain things and then go deeper into other things, right?
Yeah. And you don't, the value is in that skill stacking that Pat mentioned. That's really the value. Like it doesn't sound that impressive. Like I'm good at this, I'm good at that, I'm good at this, I'm okay at that. But the fact that you're even proficient in those things as a single being is a massive advantage, because that means whatever's thrown at you, you can understand it and handle it. So when you're hiring someone, you can smell BS. Or if an agency reaches out to you, you know whether they're speaking the truth or not. And to give you and plus, most of the stuff is not rocket science. I mean, SEO, I had a bunch of courses, a huge blog, years of experience. I work with huge brands like Airbnb. Pat learned SEO on his own. He had I think you probably still have it, a great course. You can learn it from him. Like he just taught himself in just doing it in a couple months, and knows just as much about SEO as I do, honestly. So most of these things are not that hard to
Now
learn.
you're pushing it.
But most of these things are not, but in practical
That's
terms,
true.
like getting traffic,
That's true.
most of these things are easier to learn than you might expect. So it can be daunting to be like, oh, I need to learn all this stuff. Sometimes in a weekend, you can learn some basic AI, some basic coding, SEO, content marketing, pay-per-click. Like these things are pretty easy to learn, surprisingly easy.
Yeah, are you willing to do the job? Are you willing to put in the time to learn a little bit and then do something, right? That's often a way to solve it, right? The other thing here is just volume, right? If you are 3 co-founders, you will have 3 times, the amount of hours to build something. That also matters, maybe especially in the early days where, people are not getting paid much and we still have to build a lot. So having 3 people building it, not saying it's 3 times faster, at least like 2.1 times faster. What do you think about that?
I think that in order for that to work, where let's say you have 3 co-founders and you're 3 times more productive, you need to be probably sitting at the very same desk as them and be 100% aligned on what you want to build. People actually slow down businesses. So if the goals aren't fully aligned, if you're still trying to get product market fit, if you just don't align on one specific decision, or many decisions, that actually will slow you down. And let's say that there's a designer and a coder. Well, if they're both doing that different work, the coder can't implement it without the design, and the designer can't implement it without knowing what the next feature is going to be. So that actually can slow you down, especially if you're remote, different time zones, or just not aligned in general. So I actually think that being a solopreneur, generally speaking, is faster for shipping, not necessarily faster for maybe scaling or other things. But if you just want to get something out, I could build something in a day and ship it in a day. I'm not sure I could do that in a day if I had 2 other co-founders right now.
What is Brian?
Yeah, I agree 100%. I mean, you can see different case studies of, Airbnb has 3 co-founders. Other businesses that are huge have 2. Some have very few that grow to huge numbers have 1. But I agree with you that as I've seen it, where when I started Exploring Topics, we had just me and Josh. We brought in a 3rd co-founder, and he's actually a super talented guy. He just wasn't a good fit for that time in the business, where it was basically too early because we were still figuring things out. Like we were still in figure it out mode. And he was the perfect person to come along when we went from a jazz band to a marching band. And he would help us get in line and do everything properly. But we were still figuring everything out, every product market fit, marketing. Let's try this thing. Let's test this thing out. And he was very methodical. Like, wait a second. Let's think about this. Let's think about the ramifications. And that's not really good in the early days. You want to shoot first and ask questions later. Yep. He ended up going on to a corporate job, and he did great at it because he went to a company that was public and they're huge, and he's crushing it there. He got promoted like 4 times or something. So he was perfect for that world. He just wasn't really good at like super early stage startup. And like you said, Pat, the number one thing that is a great point you raise again and again, I'm glad you emphasize it, is the speed element. Yeah. If something's slowing you down, that's akin to death. So that was the number one reason that I realized we needed to go back to 2 co-founders. Is not because he wasn't doing a good job, not because he wasn't smart. He was making contributions, but it was slowing things down because we had that, decision-making process, which needs to be like, that was like 10 times longer than it needed to be. And once we went back to 2 co-founders, things moved faster again, growth started coming, and all those good things that come along with moving quickly.
Yeah. Speed is so important. Obviously, when you go alone, you can often move faster, get going faster too. Another thing I want to touch on with regards to resources, obviously everything we talk about here, not everything, but a lot of these things we talk about here, you can just hire somebody for if you have the resource to do that, obviously. But what are things that need to be a co-founder job, and what are things that you just hire somebody for? Well, how do sort of philosophically, what would you not let others do?
I'm not sure there's anything. I mean, there's definitely things you prefer to have a co-founder do, like, or a family member, like all the financial stuff. Like when you run a business, and you start to scale, you stop using your personal credit card. You're making bank transfers to freelancers. Like you're just handing someone keys to the castle, and you need to trust them big time. So like you want a co-founder would be ideal, but you want someone that's like basically almost like a family level member of trust.
Responsible.
Outside of that, I think you can basically hire for anything. And if you're like, oh, I need to hire a co-founder, remember you can always bring someone on with equity, upside, incentives, revenue share. There's other ways that you can get aligned with that person without saying you are a co-founder. As I learned, that's a huge deal. So only say that if you're 100% sure that you're basically going all in on this journey together. And if you're not, and you're like, this person's really talented, is this something I need someone really in more than just 40 hours a week? Then just give them incentives as much as you can. Give me equity, revenue share, whatever.
Yeah, 100% agree. And it's funny that you mention someone that's like family trust or something like that. I'm not sure if you guys are aware, but I was a solopreneur for about 2-3 years. And the first person that I brought on the business and really kind of changed the business, took it from a $10,000 a month business to a $100,000 per month business, was my sister. I brought her on as basically COO. And on Brian's point is like, you really want to bring on someone that is going to think about the business, from a co-founder type of view, someone who really is in it for the long run and can make those co-founder like decisions rather than just someone who's there to take orders.
And you trust her like properly, right?
100%. Yep.
Is she a co-founder now?
Yeah, she has ownership in the business. Yeah.
I mean, that's a great. Another thing you could sort of look at is really deep understanding of what you're building, right? Meaning, if you split it up between engineering and product work, you probably can buy engineering. You tell people exactly what to build. When it comes to product work, really understand, and I really, want people that are very engaged to do that in the early stage.
Yeah, I agree with that one. And marketing too, you can find someone to do it. It's that product is that unique thing. Like even Pat was saying about Starter Story, he was able to articulate what makes it unique. If you brought in someone else, they might be like, man, this company is cool. It's a great story. They don't really share their numbers, but whatever. We need something to come out this week. So I agree with you. And I've always thought the best business opportunity in the world is like a product agency that actually does a good job, because if you could hand that off to someone, it would be game changing because you could do everything else yourself. But I just don't think it works.
No, hard to do.
Yeah.
Okay, so we're going to move to a place where solopreneurs sometimes get a little bit of a beating, and that's scaling and funding. Research from the Wharton School indicates that startups with co-founders grow and scale more quickly than solo-founded businesses. And I've personally had conversations with investors and so on, and there are numbers on this, other numbers I've seen that generally say that they do better. So there's a little bit of a contradiction here when you guys say move faster. Is it move faster at the early stage, or what do you guys think about that?
I think that's generally true, and I have heard specifically. I have seen some stuff from YC that they are less likely to take a solopreneur, and probably I think that it probably does have a lot to do with the accountability aspect. Is like, if I'm going to invest millions in your business, I want to make sure that there's other people who are going to take this to the depths that it needs to be taken to for this to become $1 billion business. That's more of a VC thing. But I also think the story comes to mind about I'm probably going to get the details wrong, but the guy who started Coinbase, and I know that I'm forgetting his name right now, but Brian Armstrong. I know that he had started building, and it was by himself, and he was posting on Reddit, and that's, he had started building. He had this idea. He had probably built some stuff already. And then he posted on Reddit that he was looking for a co-founder. And then, obviously that's a huge, massive company now. So he still even though that's, one of these huge VC things, is he still got started. He still started as a solopreneur. That didn't stop him from having to find that. He showed the world that he's willing to build this. And then he found someone who came on who could, take that to the next level.
What is that, Brian?
Yeah, I think it's all about the complementary skill sets that you're good at all these things, and that's nice. And that can get you from 0 to 1. But to go from 1 to 10 or 20, which is if you're getting like unicorn level or even like 8 figures ARR or something like that, you're going to need someone else in there that's a trench person that has a complementary skill set. Just no matter how good you are at learning, no matter how hardworking you are, no matter how great the team is, you need someone else on the higher up, the right-hand person that's with you every step of the way that has a complementary skill set to help you scale. So I agree. I think those stats are legit, and YC, they have a real financial incentive to use that as a factor, because there's 1,000 factors they could use: the product, the space, the industry, how long it's been out, what traction they have, how many users. So the fact that they look at just simply co-founder versus no co-founder shows there's definitely something to it.
Yeah.
Oh, totally.
And I think one of the big, I'm probably going to get the data wrong on this, but probably the number one reason, first of all, 90% of startups in YC fail. And I do believe that the main reason that they fail is some sort of co-founder conflict that leads to loss of momentum, or, they can't figure out the business. So, when you do look at these VC-backed companies and you look at the data, realize that for every one that is successful that has these multiple co-founders, there's 9 teams where the co-founder situation degraded or actually broke the business. So do you want to be in that 10%, I'll be successful 10% of the time if I get into YC, or maybe I can just start building now, launching, and I don't have to build a VC business. I can build a business that changes my life, and I don't have to wait for permission from co-founders. I can get started.
Yeah. But what you said earlier about Coinbase as an example, I think this, at least some advice I think we can give people, is just build something, and then you can think about that later. I mean, look, I've built something. Here it is. It could also be you built something, you're a horrible coder. Maybe you're not a tech person at all. You build something really that's not very good. Then someone who does know how to build sees is like, look, I love your idea. This is cool. What you built is shit, but I'd love to join you. Right? I mean, that's a real thing, right? That can happen.
Yep. That's what happened with Josh and Exploding Topics. I mean, it was very, very primitive compared to what we became. And even it was just a free little cool thing that you'd see on Twitter for a day. You click on it. Oh, that's pretty cool. And then forget about it. But there was something there, a nugget of something. And that was the difference. And now we teamed up, we grew it, we sold it. It would have never happened for either of us if he didn't build it and put it out there.
Yeah. Yeah. This is exactly what I tell people in Starter Story community is just show the world that you're a builder. Yeah. More will happen by doing that than anything you could ever imagine. Stop sitting on the sidelines and just put an idea, a single post online about something that you want to build, and things will magically happen.
Golden nuggets, man. That's really important, I think. So when it comes to funding, do you guys have any firsthand experience where you've talked to people, said, hey, I'd love to raise a little bit of money for this, I'm a solopreneur, and they've come back and said, no, or you need something. Have you had experience with that?
I've had people offer, even though I'm a solopreneur, like to fund in both businesses, but I probably would have got more if I had a co-founder. I don't know. It's hard to say. It's more about the business. I mean, if you're at the level of like YC, it's so early where you're just buying lottery tickets. But if you're going like Series A or something, it's more about the nuts and bolts of the business. You're not going to be like, man, they are growing like crazy. They're crazy profitable. They have a great product, but it's only one person running it. I don't know if we should invest. I don't think that really factors in after the business gets some traction.
Yeah, it probably usually maybe a little bit later, but I totally agree with it. It changes as soon as you've shown that the business works, then you can start hiring people and do all kinds of things. But yeah, I agree in general. For sure.
I went through the YC interview process as a solo founder, and that was an interesting experience. I flew out to Mountain View. I had this app. This wasn't for Starter Story. It was for another app that I was building, and that app wouldn't have been successful. So they were right to reject me through that process, but it definitely felt out of place as a solo founder interviewing at YC, where you're like ganged up on. You feel like 4 of YC partners are there interviewing you, this one person, and you don't have someone else to, go back and forth with. So
Yeah.
that was
So
my
what they
only
s-
experience trying to raise funding.
Okay.
Yeah.
And did they say, "Hey, Pat, so what's up with the other guys? Did they miss the flight, or what did they say?"
Yeah. They hammered me with questions for 10 minutes and I felt very attacked.
Yeah, I will say something. I've raised a lot of money, as you know, and when it comes to raising money, even though I was the lead in raising money, I really always enjoyed having my co-founder Thijs with me. It's just like divert, and they ask me a question, and it doesn't sort of bombard right away. He can take some of the questions, and then I get a little bit of a break. I mean, in those situations, it really matters to have people around you.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a confidence thing for sure. I think to have someone else who also believes in this thing rather than just when you're alone, you're a solopreneur. Another thing is the imposter syndrome, feeling like you're a fraud and you don't have someone sitting next to you to kind of say like, oh no, we're both in this together. And I think confidence is a lot when it comes to raising funding, which is probably why I never was able to raise, because I felt like I was a fraud in those rooms. So
yeah, there you go. Okay, thank you guys. We're going to go on a short break. And when we come back, we're going to talk about advantages and disadvantages on going solo. We've done a little bit of it. We'll have more of that. We'll be right back. Okay, we are back. In the final segment, we're going to wrap it up with advantages and disadvantages of being a solopreneur. So I would like sort of all three of us have one or two advantages or disadvantages each and see where we end up. And Brian, do you want to start us with an advantage?
The advantage is one we didn't talk about is equity. You get to own the whole damn thing. If you raise money, obviously you'll give up some, but much more. You'll own much more than if you had a co-founder.
Totally. That's we haven't even talked about this yet. This really matters also because if you think about the equity and you own most of it, you really don't have to build that big a business. Like, yeah, if you take out the co-founder and the funding, you could build a much smaller business and make the same amount of money. I think Brian knows all about that.
Yeah. I've seen a lot of founders where they sell for this massive number, and then you realize they do a podcast later and they made like $1 million in their pocket because of so many people got their hands in the pot.
A lot of sharing. Yeah. Okay, let's do one more advantage, Pat. What do you say?
I kind of mentioned this earlier, but I think the main advantage is that you can start now rather than later. Right? You can start as a solopreneur now and you can get a co-founder next month. You can get a co-founder next year. For my situation, I started and I did it for 3 years because no one was willing to work with me. And I just said, fuck it, I'm going to do it on my own. But then you can always do that later. If bringing people onto the business for me helped it grow a lot. So when I kind of realized that was going to be the next step I needed to do, I was able to do it, but I had already built that base. And like Brian said, also had the majority of ownership in the business. So, starting now is better than starting in 2 years or 3 years. And I talk to a lot of people that are just sitting on the sidelines for years, hoping that a magical co-founder will just fall into, their lap. And that's not going to happen. Got to start building, like I said earlier.
No. And there's like advice there. So I totally agree. Start now is a big advantage, but also advice in, hey, you should start right now, by the way. The other thing you said, which is really interesting. You said, well, you can just go as you're alone. But the thing is, if you're alone, you can add a co-founder. If you are two co-founders, you probably can't get rid of the other one. Yep. So that is an important thing too, right? If you're solo, you can go there, but if you start two, it's really hard to get rid of people.
Yep. Yeah, man, that just reminds me. There are many people in some of the bigger YouTube videos we've done where behind the scenes, they will say, oh, by the way, there's this co-founder that they are a solopreneur. They worked on the whole business. They built it. But oh, by the way, there's this one guy that I started working on the business with, and now he's suing me for XYZ. And it's this whole, he said, she said thing. And that is also something that is really important to look out for when you do working with people that aren't in on it. Yeah.
Yeah, totally. You said earlier also about YC and having multiple people, and very often it breaks because of founders disagree, right? I sometimes say, founders build companies and founders break companies, and it's just true. It does happen quite a lot. So let me tell you about my advantage here on this one. I mean, my number one is that you have full control and can make decisions exactly like you want to, right? I think that's a huge advantage. And I know others would also argue that, no, that's a disadvantage because you'll make better decisions if you're more than one person. There's some truth in that. Maybe they're just pointing the finger at me that I make poor decisions. I don't know, but that's a point at least that you have full control and make decisions. Okay, if you have do you have other advantages you want to put in? We have 3 now, which is good. But you want to add another one before we get to the disadvantages?
I think that's good.
We're good. We got the top ones. Okay, Brian, what do you not like about it?
I think it's a little less. I take the fun factors a little less because I've done both. I've been solo. I've had a co-founder. It's a little bit more fun to have a co-founder because those victories, you can high five someone. If you're solo, you just put your hand up at the kitchen table. There's no one there. So you have these huge victories. Like. It's like it becomes a team sport. It goes from tennis to doubles. And it's a little bit more an enjoyable process for the victories, but also just working with someone. Yeah. It's a totally different relationship than working with a team. Like your team are taking marching orders at some level, even if they're pretty autonomous. Your co-founder is like, that's your guy. Like you're in this together. So that is the main advantage, is that you have that. Otherwise, as a solopreneur, you have those advantages we talked about, but the disadvantage is you're kind of on this journey, ups and downs by yourself.
Kind of lonely, huh?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just about to say that as my disadvantages. Loneliness, 100% loneliness. Like, I know a lot of people are going back to the office right now. When I hear that, I get to go back to the office. And my wife also, she's a doctor. She gets to work in a hospital. She gets to talk to and see, potentially even hundreds of people a day. But as a solopreneur and building an online business, you may be at your kitchen table all day and not interact with anyone. You don't even get to go in the office. Not that I would want to go back to an office job, but it is extremely lonely to build an online business as a solopreneur, I believe. Yeah.
I mean, you sort of also have a double there when you say online, right? Because then you're not naturally in contact with people, right? Yeah. So that makes it extra lonely for sure. The one I wanted to add here as a disadvantage is just fewer skills and resources. I know we talked about speed and so on, but you are going to have fewer skills and resources when you are alone. That's just the way it is. Sometimes it doesn't help at all because people are exactly the same, then it doesn't change the skills. But if you find someone who's different than you can really have more skills if you're with others. So we got a few of those disadvantages. Anything missing?
Yeah, the only other one I would say is that without having a co-founder, you're gonna what I do see, because I work with a lot of people who want to be solopreneurs, is they spin their wheels for a long time. So they find themselves working on the same idea for 2 years and not really getting the feedback that they need to get. Yeah. A co-founder will be able to give you that feedback, or maybe just put new ideas into your brain on how to solve this or how to change. So I'm a big fan of just getting online, sharing online. And, if you can't connect with people in the real world because you're building this online business, go on Twitter, start sharing your story, join online communities, and try to at least virtually exchange ideas and get what you might get from a co-founder or working in an office or something like that with a team.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a really, really important point, because I do think that can happen when you're alone. You just sit in your basement and nobody's really looking at what you're doing, and then you just really likely you work in the wrong direction. Yeah. And there, I think a co-founder could help you. So advice there is, like, even if you go solo and work on something, like you say, share it, talk to people about it. Otherwise, there's a really good chance you're just going the totally wrong direction. Okay, amazing. So we have some advantages and disadvantages. We're going to move on now. I think this was really good, so people can really understand from people that are extremely experienced. So something else we also do every single week is to talk about what we're obsessed by right now. And we're very open. It can be all kinds of things. So Brian, you want to start?
I'm obsessed with meditation right now.
Oh, wow.
I've been kind of a skeptic that sitting on the couch and closing your eyes and breathing would have a huge impact. It definitely does. And the reason I say it is because I wear an Oura Ring, and that's what was like the feedback I was missing. Every time I tried it, I was like, oh, what am I doing? When's 5 minutes going to be over? It was so boring. Then I got feedback from the ring. It was like restorative time was through the roof when I started meditating, not just during, but after. So I had this like almost an afterglow experience. And I was like, oh, this is legit. So I started reading about it and learning more different techniques and different approaches to it. And yeah, I'm a believer.
So what does the ring do? It keeps an eye. Is it your pulse, or what does it keep an eye on?
Yeah, I'm not wearing it right now because it's charging. But It measures your heart rate and HRV during the day. And it basically tells you when you're stressed and when you're not stressed. Wow. And the least stressed you can be is restorative, which is almost like in a sleeping state, or like if you're on the couch watching something that's like The Office for the 8th time. It really will, show you that restorative time. But it's kind of hard to get for me because I think I'm like a driven type A, always trying to do something. And that restorative time, you need to game it basically by meditating. And it went from, let's say, 20 minutes a day to like an hour and a half a day. Wow. For meditating, because it's not just during the session, it's after you feel these just more like present, and that sort of buzz of like presence you get after the fact as well.
So how much do you do that? How much do you meditate?
About 40 minutes a day to an hour.
Okay. Wow. That's a lot.
Well, I started with 1 minute. And then 2, that's how I build habits. I always do like the lowest possible. Yeah. And then I was accelerating because I was getting the feedback loop, and I was like, damn, this is cool. Like it makes you where you actually want to do it. It's not a chore anymore. It's still tough to sit, as the cool people call it, just to sit. And it can be tough to like motivate yourself to do it, but it's like exercise. You kind of never regret doing it afterwards.
Yeah.
No one goes to the gym is like, oh, I wish I didn't go to the gym today. Unless they dropped a 45-pound plate on their foot. For the most part, people are pretty satisfied. So for me, it's been great.
Amazing. Very cool.
I love like little ways that you can gamify this, like, and something that I've been thinking about too with the restorative time. So with the Oura Ring now, do you feel like incentivized to up that restorative time number?
Yep, exactly.
Because
it's always been a struggle for me. Like the stress I've been able to decrease over time a little bit, but that restorative time, I was like, I just don't relax. And sometimes, I'm sitting in front of the TV, max, like should be totally restorative time and not restored. And then meditation was the thing that did it. And it was like, exactly every month I'm trying to get a little bit more, probably not in the spirit of meditation to be that focused on getting a number up, but it gets me to do it.
But that's how you are. That's, I can imagine me being like that too, honestly. Very cool. Pat, what do you say?
I thought about it for a second, and I think, not really related to business, but one thing that I've been enjoying, and actually in the same light of maybe a little bit of restorative time, I'm not sure if it would qualify for restorative time, but I've been really into watching sports lately as kind of like a way to decompress from, I'm probably very similar to Brian, and always on, always driven, always trying to maximize productivity. So the Yankees went to the World Series, and I've been a fan since I was a kid. Been playing fantasy football this year, and now, like, instead of, I don't really try to listen to too many in the nature of decompressing, not listen to too many business related podcasts, because I'm doing that all day. So I listen to like a few different sports podcasts, and it's like my way to decompress. So I've just been learning more about sports and like researching history about sports and how they've changed, and that's kind of what I've been obsessed with. If I could give you one thing.
Amazing. Very cool. Okay. So I'm going to go a little bit darker on you guys. Sorry. I just came back from Ukraine yesterday. I've been a big supporter of Ukraine generally. We worked there for many years. We know a lot of people there, and the sort of evil hit. So last week or this weekend, we've been driving cars from Estonia into Ukraine and donating to people there, which has been fantastic. And the reason why I'm a little worried now and a little obsessed today is, and we don't talk politics here, but we want to help the Ukrainian people. And so we're a little bit worried about maybe losing some U.S. support. I'm not saying that could happen, but Ukraine really needs all the help they can get to fight. So a little bit worried about the election in the U.S. How is that going to influence Ukraine? So a little bit obsessed by that today, that's for sure. On a more positive note, I was at a boot camp helping Ukrainian startups in Kyiv, which was fantastic. Really, want to help as much as you can. They live their lives there. They're not normal lives, but we humans are incredible survivors. So it's interesting to see what they can do there. So hoping for peace there as soon as possible.
Agreed.
Yep, definitely.
Okay, we've come to the end of another episode of Founders Weekly. Thank you very much, Pat, and thank you, Brian.
Thanks, Heini.
Thank you.
Please make sure you follow and subscribe wherever you listen to podcasts, and leave a review and rating. It really helps. For those of you on YouTube, check out Raw Startup. There's a lot of videos about building a startup. Now stop listening and go build something.